Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I've got such a wonderful guest with me. He's gained about 23 million views on his Wired interview, the first one. And he's known as Victor M. Sweeney. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And his career is being a mortician, which is such an interesting career. I remember when your video showed up on my YouTube page, like as recommended. I was at first very nervous to watch it because I was kind of fearful in learning what happens to our bodies when we pass away. But then, like your personality and your energy just made it so much more relaxing to understand what happens. And
Thank you. It is kind of funny because I have read a lot of the comments on that video, and a lot of people talk about it being recommended to them. And I have to imagine that kind of hit you with your mortality that YouTube is recommending mortician videos to you. I'm glad it was good. Like, can you imagine if you were recommended a mortician video and it was like really scary or something, or like really depressing? That would not be good.
It'd be so dreadful. Yeah, I think it's because a lot of people these days are watching serial killer documentaries and murder mysteries. I watch Bailey Sarian, for instance, and then I think the concept of death is just recommended a lot. And what's also
Nice.
ironic is I watched your videos earlier last year, and I've been a fan of Anthony for like a very long while. So I
Oh,
was so
Anthony Padilla.
surprised. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's
I
awesome.
was so surprised to see that like he interviewed you. I was like two of my idols in one video. It's just so awesome.
I I was honestly I was pretty surprised too. I mean, you have to understand, I live in a very small town. I have 1,600 people in it, so it's very small. My whole world, I live in a very remote part of the country. Uh, like most of my time is just spent like at work, doing work stuff, and at home with my family. So yeah, it's always kind of a surprise to see people like yourself across the world who have seen my video and were moved by it, or like when Anthony reached out to me and was like, "Hey, can I fly you to Los Angeles?" Like that was new to
Oh,
me,
wow.
because I'm just like a small town dude minding my own business most of the time. Yeah,
Did you get to stay somewhere or like stay in Los Angeles for a few days?
yeah.
Or
It
was it
was
just for a
no,
day?
it was just for a day. So I could have stayed longer, but like I have a 1 year old at home, and so
Oh,
and three other kids. So it was like my wife was like, "You can go, but like try to make it kind of quick." And like I think that's just kind of me to do. Like would I enjoy like going to LA and doing all the LA things? Yes. Also, like I have people back here who need me too. So I flew out and I arrived in Los Angeles at like midnight or something, and
wow.
then slept for a couple hours, hung out with Anthony for a good long time, and then like left that evening. So it was yeah, it was pretty quick.
I saw that he interviewed another mortician.
Yeah. Beyonce. No, we didn't. We were filmed on separate days. So I
Oh,
actually, yeah, I showed up and I was like, oh, I'm kind of like interested to meet the other one, and it didn't work out. So
okay.
yeah, it's
And
okay.
do you think he asked you guys the same sets of questions? Because
Yeah,
he asked some things that like didn't get to show your edit.
yeah, that was interesting. So he had like a set of questions that he asked each of us, but then really, I think it came through when he was talking with me. We really just kind of chatted more or less.
Oh,
So I mean,
that's nice.
we talked for I don't know, was it an hour and a half or something on camera, just about whatever life and philosophy and death and all the things. And then answered the stock questions too. So it was interesting. I'd be still curious to see what he talked about with Beyonce, because I'm sure their conversation went a totally different direction from ours. Like
Oh, I
two
see.
different people sitting down at two different times. Like, who knows what you're going to talk about? So it was kind of neat. It was really really interesting, and also to see what the editors chose, right? Because we talked about all sorts of stuff, and so it's
Mm.
interesting to see what they sift through and what they use and what they don't. So yeah, editing is amazing, and I want to give credit here too to like the Wired people that edited my first video,
Mm.
because that was a lot of footage that they must have combed through and picked the best. And I mean that's why these things succeed is the editor.
Did you answer other questions from Twitter that didn't make it through to
Yeah,
the video?
like a lot of them, probably
Oh,
like a dozen more, I bet.
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
it was done really well. It's just also so interesting that the first thing you answer was about poop. I was like, I think
yeah,
that
yeah.
was
It's
to
a good
get the
move,
tone.
isn't it? Yeah, you got to start somewhere, and yeah, poo is the way. No, I don't know, but yeah, it was kind of interesting because with Wired, they gave me like the night before we shot, they kind of sent out the questions. They're like, here's what we might ask you. So most of my answers were pretty off the cuff. Like you don't get a lot of time to prepare, which I think is nice.
How did Wired approach you for the interview?
Yeah. So there was a farmer north of my town who passed away and died at home on hospice. And I went out at like 3 a.m. out to his house, and it was like in the pitch black, nice fall evening. And we got to the house, and usually what happens, so if let's say someone dies at home, first thing I'm going to ask is like, how big is the person if I don't know them? How big are they? And then are there extra people to help me? Are there stairs? Is there a narrow hallway? Just kind of getting a gauge of what you're up against so I know what to bring. So in this case, easy access, a couple stairs, but the gentleman's son and his son-in-law were there to help. And so I usually like to try to get families to help me with these things. One, for the practical reason, because I can't carry the cot down a flight of stairs by myself, but also I think it gives the family an opportunity to kind of do what we might call grief work, right? Like they're actually providing something to the dead. So got to the home, sat down for a while, talked with the family. The son and son-in-law helped me get dad out of the house. And I loaded up the cot in the back of the van, and then the three of us gentlemen just kind of stood there in the driveway, and it was just a beautiful night. The stars are out, and we're in the country, and you can hear like the wind blowing through the trees in the fields, and I turned to the gentleman, and I don't know why I even said it, but I was like, guys, do you know what a mitzvah is? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, so a mitzvah in Jewish custom is an act of generosity that can't be repaid. So like your mother giving birth to you, Robin, is a mitzvah, right? Because you can't turn around and do the same for mom. So likewise, anytime we deal with the dead, all of those things are mitzvahs. So like this gentleman's son and son-in-law carried him out of the house. That's something that he can never repay them for, right? He's beyond that now. And so I just kind of explained that, and said goodnight, and got in the car and drove off down the country road. And then met with the family, planned the funeral, did the funeral, kind of did all the things. And then about a year later, the son-in-law got back to me, and he's like, hey, Victor, I just want to talk with you. He's like, I'm a writer for Minnesota Public Radio. And he's like, I don't know what I want to write about. I just want to write about something. Okay. So he like followed me around for the day and like had lunch at my house and, just hung out. And ended up writing this article about the shortage of morticians in Minnesota and how they're trying to figure that out. And then what happened is about a year after that, I guess Wired was looking to make a video about morticians. So then they searched young mortician on Google, and sure enough, the title of the article is something like, need for morticians rises as whatever. And it's a picture of me on the front. So they're like, oh, they must have been like, we'll just call that guy. So then they called me. But what's funny is they sent me an email first, and I thought it was spam. I thought it was like phishing, because it was really stock. It was like, from Condé Nast, who's the big conglomerate that owns Wired. And it said like, we think Victor Sweeney would be a really good fit for mortician video. Call us back. And I was like, ah. So then what I did is I sent the email to the webmaster at their website. It was like, hey, I think someone's trying to like steal information, so you should just know about this. And then they got back and they're like, nah, it's real, call us. So then I did. So then yeah, then I ended up on a Zoom call with like a bunch of people in New York and got the job. So there you go. That's how that happened. It's kind of the thing that my job is honestly just one long series of like telling people bad news and then answering weird questions. That's like like most of my job, at least on the social interaction side of things, is like bad news, weird questions. So like you learn how to answer those really quick. Although to be fair, most people aren't asking you about poo or poking nips or drinking embalming fluid, but like that's, you know, whatever. That's just more, yeah.
So speaking of, what does a typical day entail for you?
Well, that is kind of a hard question. So I don't really have a typical day, which is good and bad. So like today, kind of quiet this morning. So that's why I'm sitting here with you just chatting. But some days it's like, let's say, okay, let's just take like the hardest day that I have is like someone dies at 1 a.m. So I drive a half hour to go to the hospital, bring them back. Let's say they have a traditional funeral. So then I'll embalm them for the next couple hours. And then I'll go home, try to get some sleep. I'll meet with them at, let's say it's 10 a.m. So then I'll get all my paperwork done in advance. We'll have the funeral arrangement, which usually takes like maybe an hour and a half, something like that. And then the next like 3 hours are just me like calling everybody who's involved. So like the church, lining up lunch, the florist. If there's military, I'm gonna get all that stuff done. And then I'll start making funeral programs and whatever else. And then in the middle, there's usually like people that walk in and need something, or I help people set up funeral trusts. So I have my insurance license to do that. So I'll like I might meet with someone and pre-plan a funeral, and we might set aside money in a trust. I sell headstones, so I get a lot of those too, where we'll help families like design and create headstones. So the day can get really full really quickly, and you don't always know what's going to happen. So like, let's say I had the day that I described to you full of stuff, and then I get home and I like take off my tie, and then the phone rings and someone dies and I got to go again. So you don't really ever quite know what the day is going to hold. Like you might work 6 hours, which is great, or you might work 16 or more.
Oh,
So you just, yeah,
I
you never really know, which is, it's nice for me because then like my day is really varied and it never really gets boring. There's always something new and interesting to do. But like for my wife, it's really tough because she never knows when I'm going to be home, or I'm going to say, oh, I'll be home at lunch. And then I just end up working till bedtime. You know, you just don't know.
That's where my empath side is coming out. I'm so sorry that you have some difficult days, and
Yeah.
but it seems like you have it under control. And I didn't realize, I mean, it doesn't just involve working on the body, but paperwork too. And
Yeah, there's a lot actually. So that's kind of the weird thing is that you end up in my position, like you end up handling the bodies, but then most of your time is spent really like handling the family. And that's honestly it's kind of a gift, if I'm being honest. Because like body work is good and like it's kind of fun. I don't know if I can say it's fun. It's fun. Like there's like this
I
artistic
get it. It's
element
interesting.
and like yeah, and like and like if you do it well, it's really gratifying to kind of give that to a family that like you can give them their loved one looking like themselves. Like I think that's really a beautiful thing. But then yeah, the family, working with every family is tough because every family obviously has their own dynamic. And like if I don't know them, walking in and like meeting with them on the worst day of their life and getting them to trust you and be open with you is not always so easy. So it's a very strange lifestyle, I guess, for me. But it's worth it. It's so worth it.
You have this persona that is very comforting, and I think that's what helps a lot with a career like this. And that's what people need. They need reassurance and comfort that their loved one will be fine. As you said in one of your interviews, you like the approach in being there for the family, that it's two different things. It's working on the body and it's comforting the family.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't really know why those two things have to go together. Like they seem like two different jobs. But it's good. It's handy, and it's probably a nice thing that like the guy who's going to kind of help you through the funeral also knows everything about grandma. So like if there's a problem, like I've known about it since the beginning, you know. And like we talk about problem, like, you know, things like purge, or like I actually had a person pass away some time ago where they had a large tumor in their neck that I, like, after I embalmed them, I removed the tumor. Like the family asked me, like, can you do anything about that? And like, so sure enough, I excised the tumor. And so it's probably is handy that I like know firsthand what's going on. So then when they inevitably have questions about death and about their loved one, like I can answer them with surety.
The procedure for the body, like how long does it normally take you to work on it, that you kind of have an understanding what the person is like for the family?
So I would say like straight embalming, probably I'm kind of pokey in the embalming room. Some embalmers really pride themselves on how fast they can get things done. And I've never been interested in that. So it usually takes me about 2 hours, I would say, from start to finish, something like 2 hours.
Setting the features, like
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, that can, I would bet you know, if you take your time, like that should take you 15 minutes probably, 15 to 20. And then you have like the embalming, and that can go really fast or it can take forever. So you don't, that's hard to tell. But I'd say probably 2 hours. And then like usually I'll get people dressed not in the middle of the night. So I'll get, you know, I'll embalm their bodies. I'll wait a little bit just to make sure everything's cool, like we don't have any leaking or anything like that. And then I'll get them dressed, and that, you know, that doesn't take too long, maybe a half hour depending on what they're wearing. And then makeup's kind of all over the place too. So like I don't really like to use a lot of makeup. I tried not to use any if I can help it. But sometimes you have situations where, like, let's say, I don't know, dad fell and has a great big bruise on his face, and the family like just wants him to look like himself. So then I'll ask them, you know, because I was there at the beginning, when we meet to plan the funeral, I can ask them like, would you like me to cover up dad's bruise? Or would you like me to paint mom's fingernails? Or, you know, just little things like that. And so, yeah, makeup, and in the funeral world, we call it cosmetizing. I don't know why we have this special word for it, cosmetizing. But at any rate, cosmetizing could take like a short amount of time, or it could take like an hour if you're like really trying to like cover up grievous injury. So it's all over the place. But yeah, I mean, the time that I spend working with the body pales in comparison with the time that I spend planning the funeral, working with the family, talking with the family. It's like I always get kind of weird when people are like, "Oh, I'd be a great mortician. I hate people." It's like, well, that's not. It's actually the opposite. You're going to spend more time working with the living than you are with the dead, unless you're like, I don't know, some backroom person who like only embalms all day for like some large scale operation. But in a position like mine, I do it all. So it's good that you got to know how to do it. You know.
I'm glad you kind of take a breather from not being in the back room the whole time and working on bodies, and that you're working with the family too.
You know, there are definitely days where like it'd be much easier to just be in the back room all day, where like, let's say you have a really challenging family. You're like, oh man, like, if I could just embalm all day, like I would just do that and never have to worry about all this other junk. And then, you know, there are days too where like it seems like a chore and it's just like one more thing you have to try to cram into your day. So yeah, the variety is good. That's what makes the job doable, I think.
So the game The Mortician, they allow you to do the stapling of the mouth shut.
Yeah,
which is so cool. It's like a satisfying sound to me. Like,
yeah,
the way
like,
that it hit
click,
hard. Yes.
Yeah, it's you know, I remember when I was in mortuary school in the embalming lab, and there was a girl in my class who like that sound really freaked her out. She's like, everything's fine. I don't like that. So yeah, it is kind of weird. It is, yeah, it is satisfying. One thing with the needle injector, you do have to be careful of. It's like, um, when you work with the elderly, sometimes their bones are quite fragile. So like a lot of times I don't use a needle injector if I have someone who is frail, because that piston goes so hard to pound the brad and you can like shatter the bone. I'm like, I don't want that. So yeah, there are a couple different, none of my videos have talked about all the different ways to close the mouth. There are so many ways to do it. So like the needle injector is one way. In one of my videos, we talked about suturing through the septum and then back down through the frenulum. That works pretty well for like middle-aged to younger people. People in their 70s too is fine. The thing is, you have to have your own teeth. Like if you have your own teeth, then everything is intact, well formed. That works well. If you don't have your own teeth and you have dentures, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go through the frenulum and then down outside, out like through the bottom of the jaw. And then what you do is you put it back in through the same hole and then loop around the jaw and then back up. So then you have a good, you can lift the jaw up. That works well. Sometimes like when nothing works, what you can do is just get like a strip of cotton and get it wet and just kind of use that and the weight of it to hold the mouth closed. Like that works too. But then you have to make sure that the embalming fluid will firm everything up enough to keep the jaw closed when you're done, which is different. But because that's the thing, like embalming is, you guys don't practice it in South Africa, do you? Probably not.
I'm not sure. Perhaps.
Yeah, it's prevalent in like the United States, Canada, Australia. But so the reason we do it, I'm reading this book called The American Way of Death, which was published in '63 by Jessica Mitford, and it's really critical of funeral service. It was the mine's like the second edition, and it says like a bombshell on the front, which it was. It like totally upended funeral service, because prior to that, someone in my position, like let's say you walk in, one of your parents has died, I'll say, I'll sell you a casket for $3,000 and that'll include all of my services, right? So we don't even talk about everything I do, or like I don't even get your permission to embalm. It's just assumed, right? And so after that book was published, a lot of things started changing in the funeral industry. I think some morticians like woke up and are like, oh yeah, maybe people like want to know what we do, and maybe telling people what I actually accomplish for them provides value, which I think it does. So then in 1984, the Federal Trade Commission in the US made a big sweeping law that kind of dictates what kind of disclosures I must make to a family, how I itemize out my funeral bill, what I charge for, what I can't charge for, etc. So that's been really good. I think the transparency is nice. But so Jessica Mitford in her book, what were we talking about? Sorry, I got really off track.
Embalming?
Yeah, okay. So but yeah, so Jessica Mitford was talking about how like when she was writing this book, she would interview these funeral directors, and like they wouldn't even get permission from the family. They would just do it.
Oh.
And so that's, yeah, so it's been good though. I think a lot of the changes that have come after that have been good, and reading it is kind of like a time capsule, because it takes you back to just when it was kind of the Wild West funeral service was, just kind of do whatever you want. And so now I think normally I'm not like a huge fan of micromanaging, but I think in this case, when you're dealing with people's emotions and like a lot of money changing hands, I think having the government step in to kind of make sure things are above board is a really good thing. So and one thing that actually, this is kind of cool. So she was saying when she wrote her book in May of '63, the average cost for a funeral, including grave digging, all that stuff, was $1,450. And so So I ran it through an inflation calculator, and that's like close to 15,000 American dollars today. And so what's crazy though is I'm looking at my prices, and I would say like an average funeral with everything included, like she's talking about, is closer to like $12,000 or $13,000. So at least for me, like my funerals that I'm doing are actually below what the average was in 63.
I like it that it's a lot cheaper. So we deal with the rand in South Africa, and the exchange rate is for $1 it's 17 rand. So
No.
if you say $12,000,
Yeah, run it through the calculator.
that is 219,000 rand. Oh my god.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's crazy.
So what does like a cup of coffee cost in rand, just so I can get an idea?
Okay, yeah, so it goes for about 50 rand. So then that would be about $2.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's expensive.
Yeah, our country is corrupt.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm just gonna put it there.
When I was when I studied in Ireland in college for a little bit, and when I was there, it was like what was it? It was high. It was like terrible though. It was like $1.70 or $1.80. It was like almost $2 to every euro at that time.
Oh.
And like that was a bummer. I couldn't have as much fun as I had hoped. I was a little cash strapped. I was paying my own way. So it was yeah.
I've gone to like Florida before as a child,
Yeah?
and I've gone to Paris, yeah. So I've
Really?
dealt with like both currencies.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like €2 to use a bathroom stall. I think that would be about 50 rand. But I'm not sure what the euro-dollar exchange rate is.
Yeah, see if in America someone charged you to go to the bathroom, like you'd have a riot.
I see that. I do. Going back to the game,
Yeah.
I'm very interested because with the Mortician, we learn how to prepare a body, and I think my most favorite part is setting the features, and this includes the eye caps.
Yeah, sure.
It freaks me out like that. You know what worries me? It's like, what if the person's alive and you put the eye caps? Like I don't know. There has to
It'd
be a
be
way
terrible.
to do it.
I was joking with a friend, and I was like, there's probably like a BDSM market for eye caps. Like.
Oh my God. I never thought about that. You're right.
I don't know. No one's asked me yet. Thank God. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, I don't know how to explain it to you, but like when you see a dead body, like it's dead. It's amazing. I like, obviously, like if someone dies in hospice, like the nurse comes and double checks and whatever. They'll check for a pulse, check for heart rate. But I don't know what it is. Like you see a dead body and like you just know it's not animated by a soul. Like you just know there's like something missing.
That's such a wonderful way to put it.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah. And like it goes from being like a human person to a human body. There's like some gulf that's just jumped over, and it's totally different. At least for for eyes, like if I were to train you how to put in eye caps, which are not hard to do, the thing that you'd notice though is if you open a person's eye, you'd notice that like they're not like glossy and wet, right? Because you're not making tears, you're not blinking, and then they kind of go like cloudy a little bit.
Yeah.
As things like, it doesn't take long to break down, but it goes a little cloudy, and they're like matte. They're not glossy anymore. And so like you could open someone's eye, like I don't know. I don't want to have like a competition, but like if you showed me like a picture of someone's eye that's open, and then showed me like a picture of like a person's dead body with an open eye, like I could guarantee you I could tell the difference.
That person's dead.
Yeah. There's just something about it. I don't know what it is. Yeah, and like you can just tell like there's like no one is looking out, like no one's looking back at you. It is just the strangest thing.
Oh, Oh,
Yeah,
I understand. Okay, I
yeah,
see. Okay, so my best friend and I've had like a best friend since I was 2 years old. She's
good for
such a
you.
sweetheart. Thank you. I believe she's a soulmate. You know, you get soulmates in friend forms too, not just as a partner.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
she
a
definitely,
kindred, a kindred spirit.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yes,
So she kind of has a few things. We discuss death quite often. I'm not sure why. But I
as you.
told her when I die, please make sure my cell phone is with me in my coffin. So if I'm alive, I can just
There you
message
go.
her and be, dude, please
Probably
get me
like
out.
pro tip, like turn the ringer off though if you're gonna do that, because it'd be super awkward if you got like a telemarketer call like when you were in the casket. You wouldn't want your phone going off. So turn off the ringer. There you go.
Is it possible to bury someone with a cell phone? Do you think the
Yeah,
signal would be strong enough? Like
I don't know.
so many feet down?
Really good question. Maybe. I've never tested it. We'd have to run a test.
And then
But I'm
I
not but
do
I'm not
have
gonna volunteer.
I have a lot of tattoos, and
Yeah.
your answer on tattoos kind of fascinated me, but it freaked me out because my best friend said if I die one day, she's gonna get a piece of my tattoo cut off and she's gonna frame it. But I think she's like,
Oh yeah,
so
I like
what
that.
happened? Oh, thank you. What happens to ink when a person passes away?
It just breaks down along with the rest of their body.
Okay.
Yep.
So it doesn't
Yep.
bleed out like the
No.
ink bleeds out, or
Nope.
okay.
No, and I've like cut through tattoos before. Um,
Mm.
like people that are very heavily tattooed, like if you're going to prepare their body, like you have to gain access to a vessel. So like I've cut through tattoo, and like yeah, like the skin is dark, but like indistinguishable like by any other metric. Like you don't have any ink coming out. It's yeah, it's. So what I would do if I were your friend, to avoid the probably any legal implications of mutilating you trying to get your tattoo. Maybe what you do is you get like the original drawing or like a really good picture, and then your friend could like get the tattoo on themselves. That
Yeah,
that would
better.
be that would be the better alternative.
Because I'm also thinking that your skin, like when people assume that your hair grows out and your nails grow longer, it
Yeah.
doesn't because it's the skin shrinking. So I
Yep.
think that's what would also happen if you got like a tattoo cut off. Like that part would shrink like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. If you did, like, it would just dry out. If you had to cut off a tattoo, I wouldn't recommend it probably. I did
Uh,
did design a headstone a couple of years ago. And it was a younger person that passed away, and we took a picture of their tattoo that was on their forearm, and we had it made into an engraving on their headstone. So that was
oh
pretty cool.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was
that's
pretty
beautiful.
cool. It baffles me that I'm coming up in like everyday conversation between people, which is good. I
Oh,
mean, it's probably good that
really?
people are talking about death. Maybe, um,
Mm.
I have a friend who went to visit his girlfriend who lives in Mumbai,
Hmm.
and they were
Wow.
like whatever, they were hanging out at like a party or something, and like
Yeah.
somehow I like not through him, somehow like I came up in conversation like in Mumbai. So I don't know how this works, but yeah.
What is a cultural death ritual for you that you find fascinating
Like in my own culture or just broadly?
broadly?
Hmm. Well, I
Just
think
maybe.
there's really something to be said about any culture that like has a funeral in a short period of time and
Yeah.
like doesn't embalm bodies. I think I kind of like the idea of like maybe like the old pioneer way of just like holding the funeral, digging the grave, putting them in. Like there's something about like the immediacy that I think is kind of attractive, because like in my culture, we tend to wait a long time to do things, which I mean is probably partially because we're such a big country, right? Like I like my parents live a 9 hours drive from here, and that's like not super abnormal. So
Mm.
like if one of my parents died, like I'd have to gear up to drive 9 hours to go to their funeral, right? So it being held the day after they die would be really hard for me to accomplish. Uh, so yeah, like in my own culture, like part of the reason we have embalming is to preserve a body long enough for everybody to gather. Go.
When you embalm a body, I remember it was mentioned that it's temporarily like set. How long
Yes.
does embalming last for in our form?
I don't know. Like I've held bodies for several months before.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
like just in certain circumstances, like families are either like overseas or whatever, they can't get back. So like I've held them for a couple months,
Oh,
and
I
like
see.
it's one of those things where you have to check on the person every day to like make sure everything is hydrated and they're not drying out, and you're not having other decomposition issues. But I don't really know how long a body lasts. Like the thing is, like once they're in the ground, like you can't really check on them so much.
You know what physically happens when someone dies, but to you, what do you feel happens to you spiritually when you die?
Oh, it's like when your soul leaves your body. Do you believe in a soul?
I do.
Okay, good. I don't know. I'd be hard pressed to not believe in a soul. Um,
Hmm.
but in any case, no, I think when you die, your soul leaves your body. Um, I'm a Catholic, so
Okay.
I believe you'll be judged according to like your faith and your works. Um, and your works need to be inspired by goodness. You'll also be judged on what you know. Like so, for instance, um, like someone who lives in like the remotest part of, I don't know, pick a country, uh, Mongolia, who's like who their whole lives have been like doing good based on like what they believe their what their code of morality is. I think like you'll be judged on that, like how well you've tried to be moral according to your understanding of it. I think that's how you will be judged. um I believe there's God. I believe that he cares about us. I believe that
Mm.
he like wants what is good for us. um and honestly, there are all sorts of things that we believe in that we can't touch, right? like 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 when you have a little kid and something goes wrong, they're like, that's not fair, right? Like we believe in fairness, right? Or justice, if we want to call it justice, but like you can't touch justice.
Yeah.
And yet you could go to like any culture, and like we all somehow have the same idea of what justice is,
Hmm.
or things like love. Like every culture, right,
Exactly.
experiences love for like
Hmm.
other people.
Hmm.
And like we all experience this. This is like a universal, but we can't touch it. And so I think in the same way, like if there are all these like fundamental human experiences like love and justice that um we experience them, but we don't have like a physicality for them. Like there must be something inside of us that can touch these things that aren't physical. And so like there must be like our soul must exist. And I think if things like justice and love are eternal, there's no reason to think that like the part of us that touches justice and love, like our soul, there's no reason for me to think that that's not eternal as well. So there we go.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
I've personally been fearing what happens when we die. I am of faith, but then I also feel because when you're in the womb in the beginning,
Mhm.
you don't witness anything or
Yeah.
we don't have memories of that. But then people have had near death experiences where they see the light or they've met
Mhm.
God, and it's 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 like so many different things. Someone also told me once that what you believe will happen when you die is gonna happen. So you could also be energies that could just be like um dissipated.
Okay.
I can't think of the term now. Yeah, but like some people also believe in an afterlife, but I like to think that we are in a better place. Hey, so spiritual, I believe that like we can roam the earth when we die just to be there for people. I believe that I've had so many visitation dreams. I've had two aunts pass away
Mhm.
and I didn't dream about them for a while. And I dreamed they came to pick me up and we drove somewhere. That next morning, Lauren messaged me saying her grandfather passed away. I was like, I have to attend the funeral, and I did.
Yeah.
And it's things like that that gets you. And then I also feel that we need to reach closure when we pass away. There's this one unsolved mystery about this husband that has his wife's remains, and he sleeps next to her every night, and he won't allow his son to get anything from them.
Okay.
The son and the mother were very close, and I feel that she's maybe a restless soul right now.
Hmm.
And I just feel that we all need to be at peace when we pass away, and that we can be there for our loved ones and comfort them in a sense.
Yeah, I would say there are probably things I can agree with in that. What's funny is that from my position, I hear about a lot of these things. And I've seen some of them happen myself. Like for instance, I was at a graveside service once, and this young man had passed away, and the mother was reading a poem, and she talked about the rainy days, and it was like an overcast day. And then she talked about how the sun would come, and I kid you not, the sky opened up, and we had like sunlight in one patch. I was standing in it, like we were all in it, and then it closed back over again. So I think, like I said, I think there is this immortal, immaterial part of us, and I don't know how it works. Like we don't have the senses to like understand it. Like we know it exists. I mean, I guess you could not believe it exists. That's fine. But like everything about living tells me that there's something inside of me and inside of you that is like this amazing, immaterial, magical thing. We don't know how to measure it, but I think I'm okay with that. Like I think I'm kind of okay with there being a little mystery in life. Like it make like the mystery kind of makes life worth living a little bit. Like not knowing what's next. Like think about, you mentioned like being in the womb. Like imagine that transition from like all you know from like the moment of your conception is like warmth and like the sound of your mother's heartbeat, right? And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden everything changes. And
Yes.
yet but you and I are used to it now. Like we're so used to that. So like why would we be afraid of like whatever that next transition is, like when it comes,
I
you
think
know?
another amazing way to describe that we do have souls inside us is what you mentioned earlier about the eyes. That I think that glowy wetness that we have with our eyes is the soul, and when it's matte, that's when the soul has left the body.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's I honestly I'm in such a strange and beautiful position, because I'm like right in between, like all the time, like the living and the dead. Like not that I'm a mediator, but like I help people figure out how to like bridge that gap, you know? And there's something really beautiful about being able to like see both sides up close, to be able to see um families interacting, and like families like showing affection and love and even anger and grief. Those things are human and good. But then also like, I get to see, I get to think about my own mortality like through the lens of like seeing other people's dead bodies all the time. And I think that's probably why like America has this long tradition of seeing our dead. Like there's something about it that is uh, kind of shocking a little bit. And but I don't think it's bad. Like I think it's good for us to be with our loved ones when they die. It's like it's good for them, like to be with them as they're dying. But I think it's like after the fact and even during that period of time, like it's good for us too. We get to kind of lift the veil a little bit and like experience something that is new and scary, but new a little bit. I don't know.
so as a person that's gone to so many funerals, I've attended some friends' funerals, my
Yeah,
family,
yeah.
Lauren's granddad. Not once have they been open casket funerals. Do you mind please explaining to me what that procedure is like? Because I
Sure.
remember your interview with Anthony. He was talking about seeing his grand's face the
Grandma.
day
Yeah.
before, and that he appreciates your career so much more, but I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, it's okay, so typically, you know, when we view a body, um it's like semi-private. It depends on the family, but usually like we'll have something maybe the night before, the day before, where the family will come in and see their loved ones. And that kind of privacy is nice because then it's just the family and mom and dad, right?
Mm.
Um, but then the day of the funeral, usually what we'll do is we'll have the casket in either another room or maybe at the back of the church, or let's say it's at the funeral home, we'll have it in the chapel, we'll have it open, but then when the funeral before the funeral service starts, we'll close the casket. And so then kind of from that moment, there's like this hard line where I think I had it explained this way once, where you know everything the night before, let's say, or even like the moment before the funeral starts, everything is kind of looking backwards, right? Like we're looking on our
Yeah.
loved one, we're looking backwards, we're thinking about the past, and then ideally, like the funeral service and what follows should be about looking forward. So like
Mm.
thinking, you know, thinking about like where is granddad's soul going to go? What is my life going to look like when my grandpa's not here? Right? Like these are like important things. Um, but so yeah, like I don't ever leave the casket. Like let's say I have a funeral here at the funeral chapel, and I have the casket in the front of the chapel open for the family when they come. I don't ever leave it open for the whole thing. Like I always like we'll close it. A lot of times we'll close it together. Like we'll have all the family around and we'll like tuck grandma in and we'll close it together. And like that's a beautiful thing. And I like being able to give that to families. But no, it's interesting. Can you tell me, so like what's a funeral like in South Africa?
All right. I have a Christian family, so what happens is, um, sometimes they leave the funeral for 5 days after the death was announced, or 2 weeks.
Okay.
Um, and then we attend the funeral. We get the booklet. What do you call the
Yeah,
booklet?
yeah. I don't know.
The
Everyone calls it
pamphlet?
something different. Yeah, a little pamphlet with like their information and a picture and yeah.
Yes, and like a
Yeah.
hymn or
Hmm.
two, and then you'll get like a family member going on to the stage and saying a speech,
Okay.
and you might have some other family members standing with them and being just emotional.
Yeah.
Um, the casket will be behind them.
Hmm.
I've dealt with a lot of deaths that were cremated, so I
Sure.
don't think they bothered with the coffin.
Right.
And flowers all around, so many prayers, just sitting together at the church, and then we leave. Oh, and then there's the what do you call it? It's not an after party. It's a
You could say like a reception or something like that. I don't know.
yeah. There's another term for it. It's like a awakening.
Yeah. Okay.
Awake, awake. It's called
Wake.
awake.
Yeah.
So then we kind of socialize there.
So do you find it helpful? Is it helpful to you? Like
For
what
which
you
part?
guys like just your family's rituals around death? Do you find it helpful?
I'd actually like it if we had an open casket one. I'd like
Huh?
to see. Okay.
See, and that's the thing. That's kind of the gift, you know, for whatever criticism the funeral world gets. Like I think that is exactly the gift that we can give to
Mm.
families. Um, because it is like, you know, death is like it's an ugly thing, you know. I mean, and I think it's okay that it's ugly. But there's something to be said about having the opportunity to kind of lessen that a little bit, right? Like
Mm.
like the way I always think about it is like when I have families that are with their loved ones in like the nursing home, let's say, it's always like, you know, like bring like let's bring mom's clothing. Let's just like get her into her own clothes. And like that like that small thing is huge. Just like getting someone in their own clothes, you know, like not a hospital gown, not whatever.
Mm.
So no, it's yeah, that's well, I'm sorry, that's tough. That's really tough.
Uh, I think you can kind of relate because this is what I admired about you too. Because I watched your interviews and you mentioned that you saw your friend's body when you were 4 years old.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess it was Some like, did you just walk in and you saw the body?
Yeah. So this is actually, let me tell you something. I earlier, see, late last year, I've been trying to find this kid's mom. His name is Robbie. I've been trying to find his mom for years. And I was working a visitation at the funeral home, so it was like late, and I was just here, you know. So I started like searching again, and I found his mother. And so I sent her an email at her work, and I was like, "Hey, you probably don't remember me, but like, I used to live across the street from you. Like we should talk." And she called me back that night, and then we got to FaceTime at another time. But because you know, I told her, I was like, you know, this was back in 1993, so I was actually 3 years old when this happened. I wasn't even four.
Oh.
I just learned a couple months ago. I was 3, and I was like, "Miss Carroll, can I just tell you everything I remember from that day?" And she's like,
Oh.
"Sure." And so I like walked her through everything that happened. So like we got to his house, and he was still sleeping. So I ran up and climbed up into his bunk bed, and like tried to wake him up, and he didn't wake up. Like I can tell you the sheets that were on the bed. Like I can, and then I just like I walked her through like everything I remember, and she's like, "That checks out." And then that was kind of a relief to me, because like you kind of wonder, you know, when you're a little kid, like, is some of this just like
Mm.
stories I'm telling myself? Like, is this the truth? And it turns out that like we remember everything exactly the same. And and now actually she she works with like she actually works with grief and children and nursing students. So uh,
Oh.
we've kind of reconnected actually after a gap of, you know, close on 30 years.
Wow.
And but no, it's like it's a strange thing to have to find a dead body. Actually, I have dreams about it all the time. Finding not finding my friend, but
Mm.
finding dead bodies like
Yeah.
on the regular.
Well, I don't blame you.
Yeah, but what's kind of weird is that it's always like it's never like a horror thing or anything like that. It's always like it's
Oh.
like a work dream, you know? Like if you have a normal desk job, like you probably dream about like, oh, I forgot to, I don't know, submit this
Yeah.
report, whatever it is. So like my work dreams are like, oh, I found a body, I better get to work. So that's kind of odd, but yeah.
Like an automatic feeling for you.
Yeah, like
Uh,
you do. You snap into work. Like if I, you know, was visiting my grandma and like came home and found her dead, like I can guarantee you I'd snap into work mode. There's like
Wow.
a switch that just kind of flips, and you just like start doing your job. Which is good. Like which is good and bad. Like you kind of have to have that switch a little bit.
Mm. I
Because
get
like
it.
you walk into some really bad situations in this job. Like you walk into some really terrible things. And so it is sometimes it's kind of nice that you can just flip the switch and go to work. And then like you turn the switch back off when you meet with the family, right? So like you have to learn how to do it. I don't know how to explain it to you or how to like teach someone to do it, but I think it's just something you learn over time, like how to vacillate between between the practical side and then the kind of more empathetic and helpful side. But it's yeah, it's a different thing.
And then 2 years or 3 years ago, then the pandemic, my gran was in an old age home, and like that was when you couldn't visit anyone. Like,
Yeah,
and she passed away in August in 2020, but and she was 103.
no kidding. Wow.
She said her I always asked her like what's her secret? She said she never smoked, she never drank, and she just ate like whatever she wanted to. And I was like, okay, that's a secret to eternal
There you
health.
go. Yeah, you heard it here first.
Um, so that was a bit sad because we couldn't be there for her. I'd say thankfully she didn't die from COVID. It was
Yeah,
more just old age.
yeah.
And
That's still hard. That's still hard to kind of have um everything disrupted and dying alone. We dealt, you know, we dealt with that here too, and that was kind of a hard thing to do. And that's probably where having the capability to have family viewing and that kind of thing was really nice, because then
mm,
at least we could offer them that. Or like when my state said we can only have 10 people in any given, you know, any given building at a time, what we would do is we have two doors to my chapel, one of which goes outside, like the emergency exit. And so what we do is we let 10 people in, and like they'd pay their respects or whatever, and then we'd have them go outside, and then we'd let 10 more people in. Like, so we were just like shuffling. So we'd always meet the requirement, but then at least we got people here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or like we had a lot of outdoor funerals. That was kind of cool. Something a little different. I don't know, but
I think with the
it was
pandemic,
hard.
we couldn't do wakes, and yeah, the limit was about like 10 people for my grand's funeral. There I got to see a funeral director and speak to him.
Yeah,
That was organizing of the cremation, and it's
sure.
interesting because you could get like the ashes put into a key ring, but like a beautiful gloss marble design
Yeah,
or a
sure.
painting for a necklace.
Hmm.
But it's all like, it's not like, oh, those are Grand's ashes. It's more like it's art with some of Grand's ashes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then we got to see the price differences of all the urns, and it's
Hmm.
just interesting to see. And he was very polite, and
Well, that's
yeah.
good.
Um, I think it's legal in South Africa to have open casket funerals. I just
Yeah,
don't think my family is comfortable enough to have those.
yeah.
I was wondering, how many bodies in total have you worked on?
Gosh, I wonder this. I have no idea. So when I was in college, I worked at the whole body cadaver lab, like the whole body donation lab at my university. So I was working with hundreds, hundreds and hundreds.
While you
Um,
were studying?
yeah, well, I was studying, and then like since then, I don't know, maybe 100 a year, and I've been licensed for
Oh,
a decade. So
oh
probably
Jesus.
more than that. So a lot, very, very many. I don't know.
I'm very interested to know like how it's not affecting you psychologically. Okay, you say you have the dreams and they are
Yeah,
calming.
yeah,
Um, but do you think there's any morticians that can't handle it, like after a couple years? Like,
yeah.
do you
Oh yeah,
see yourself doing this
super.
for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I will do this until I die, for sure. There's no doubt.
Okay.
And there are the attrition rate of morticians is really high. Like I don't remember what it is, but let me put it this way: my graduating class of I don't remember how many students. Anyway, I did the math. I got my roster from when I graduated, and I like Google searched each of them, and only 50% are still in funeral service, which is actually really good because usually
Yeah.
it's like fewer than that stay, fewer than 50% stay with it. So yeah, the attrition rate really really high. There's one guy I worked with in the cadaver lab who got his license, worked at a funeral home, and he was he was like really spooked working at night. He like couldn't work at night in a funeral home when there was a dead body there. So then he had to quit, and then he only worked during the day in the cadaver lab. So like yeah, I
Oh.
think yeah, like we always say like it takes a special, or people say, right? It takes a special kind of person to do your job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does. I think there's some things like you learn along the way. Um, but I had a student once ask me, like, well, how do you cope? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was thinking about it, and I don't think I've ever actively coped. Like I don't worry about things. I don't stress about things. Um, I don't like sit there and psychoanalyze myself a whole lot. Like
Okay.
I just do my job. I just take care. Like I'm here to just take care of people, and like I shouldn't have to worry about bringing it home. So I just don't. You know,
Yes,
I don't know how to
exactly.
explain it to you.
And I
Yeah,
feel your family also helps you in a way, being able to see them
absolutely.
every time you come
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is
There's
so comforting and shame.
yeah.
It's sweet. You deserve it. You deserve it for sure.
Oh,
Because
thanks.
yeah, I think if it, I wouldn't say if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be able to cope. But it's more like that they're your motivation, and they help
Yeah,
keep you going.
it it definitely helps. I mean, I think just understanding that like death is really a part of life
Hmm.
is huge, right? So like the it's not like I go to work and I disconnect and I do this morbid. weird thing. Like it's just part of my everyday life. Like it's what I'm here to do. It's part of who I am. So like I shouldn't have to try to like learn to cope with something that just comes very natural to me, you know?
I'm
So
just curious about like how you like switch off if it comes to someone you personally know.
oh
Like,
yeah.
I don't know if I'd be able to do that. I'm not
Well,
sure.
see, and that's the thing. You don't switch off. So actually the first small town mortician I ever met was in my wife's mother's hometown. And he had just quit. He's like, I'm sick of burying my friends. I'm sick of burying like everyone I know. And so when I took the job up here, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna be in this small town. I'm gonna get to know people. I'm gonna have to quit because I'm gonna be like sad about burying them. Um, but the reality is, I've buried a number of my like little old man friends, and it's really nice in a lot of ways. Like I know
Hmm.
them. So like when I sit down with their family, I'm like, oh yeah, I know Sylvester really well. We're friends. Like we have this connection because like I'm not a stranger. And then too, like if you think about it as like an act of service, like granted I'm getting paid for it, so that's kind of tough. Um but like if you think about it in terms of like service, like I'm doing something for my friend Sylvester, right? Like
Aw.
I'm giving Sylvester's like family the gift of like seeing him looking like himself. And he's not yellow like he was when he died. And he's wearing
Oh.
his suit. And I've tied his tie and I've like cinched it up just like how he likes to wear it. And so it's like all those little things, like, and like, did I cry at his funeral? Yes. Did I like try to talk to a couple of his grandkids and start like getting all verklempt and have to like walk away? Yes. um, but like that's okay. Or like my best friend took his own life. It'll be 5 years ago this fall. And
Oh,
like
I'm
I
sorry.
cried like a baby through his whole funeral. Okay, like when his parents called me, and were like, Victor, what do we do? Um, I was able to help them and try to figure some of this stuff out. But did I also cry through his whole funeral and like just openly weep the whole time? Like, yes, and that's
Oh,
okay. You know.
yes.
So like I don't really like when I talk about flipping the switch. Like, yeah, you go from like work mode to family mode, but like I don't ever really like disconnect. Like I'm always connected, and I don't know. And I think that's good. I think like if you were a funeral director who just like turned it off and like turned into a robot, like what's the point? What's the point? Like we're all humans here.
I think those that can easily switch off are like borderline serial killers to me because
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah. I've had
like
a lot of
some
people throw that at me, but I'm not a serial killer. Promise.
cinnamon toast can like compare you to Dexter. It's like he's Dexter. I couldn't stop laughing at that because he's also like
No,
very
it's not true.
clean and um so this isn't your work attire when you prepare bodies, right?
No,
That you're wearing right
so
now.
yeah, I have like a set of scrubs and then just like a
Okay.
ton of personal like protective equipment. So like maybe it's in the mortician game, but you have like an impermeable gown and a smock and shoe covers and a mask and goggles and a hairnet and all that stuff. And like two pairs of gloves is usually a good move. Um, but yeah, so like I don't wear this in the prep room. That would be like it would look very cinematic, but it's not the way it is. Yeah.
Do you ever feel too hot? Like, is it too humid when you wear that
Yeah. Oh,
attire?
it's sorry. Yeah, we actually have an air conditioner in
Okay.
our embalming room that I
Okay.
run. Like it could be winter and I'll run that thing because it gets hot. Yeah, it gets hot.
And then speaking of embalming fluid, why are
Yeah.
there so many different colors for it? Is it for the skin tones?
Yeah, some of it's for the skin tone. Honestly, I think a lot of it is just identifiability. So like I can like look at like I know what my inventory is and I can be like, that pink one is this and it has X and Y properties. 'Cause that's probably a lot of it because like some of them are like have internal coloring agents, like they have dyes in them, and some that
Mhm.
I have don't. Like some are just like straight, like they firm and disinfect and preserve. That's all they do. So then I have to like add my own dye.
I see.
Yeah, so like I don't exactly know, but I think a lot of it is just the ability for me to like know what I've got at like a glance, rather than having to like imagine if I have 6 chemicals, they all do different things, they all have different properties. If they were all the exact same color, if I mix that up, I'd be in big time trouble, right? So I think that's part of it. Like they color code them a little bit for you.
And what inspired you to be a mortician?
Well, I always wanted to be a Catholic priest growing up, like from the time I was a little kid. And in high school, when I discerned that's not what I was going to do, I was kind of stuck in this position of trying to figure out what I was going to do. So I don't know. I was like, oh, psychologist maybe, or like, because I'm really only good at talking to people, really. And my godfather, who's also a priest, gave me this book by a classmate of his called The Undertaking. It's by Thomas Lynch. He's a poet and undertaker. And I read that book and was like, oh, that's a job I could do. Like, I'm gonna go try it out. So I called my local funeral home and asked if I could just like volunteer or get a job there, and they hired me for whatever whatever minimum wage was. And I got to like basically shadow at the funeral home, and realize like this is something I could do. Like it has like the hands-on aspect, which is really great. There's like an artistic aspect. There's the pastoral part, which is really good, being able to like serve a family and guide them and console them, which I really like. So it kind of just like checked all the boxes. I was like, wow, like all these things that come really naturally to me, I can do in this job. And it's been a gift. I never, if you would have told me when I was a kid, like you're going to become a mortician, like I wouldn't have known what to tell you. But as it turns out, like a lot of the things that a lot of my God-given talents, I get to use in my job on a daily basis. And that has been just like the biggest blessing.
Oh, that is amazing. I admire it a lot that you're religious as well as a mortician. So you believe in good afterlife, and you only want the best for the family and the deceased. And
yeah,
that's a wonderful way to see it. I was actually watching Cloud Atlas on the weekend with my father, and there was an amazing line. I forgot the rest of what the girl said, but she said from womb to tomb, and I was like, that is mind blowing. Yeah, everything you do in between that is what matters most, and
yes,
you need to make the most of your life. And then afterwards, then morticians come in and just kind of sign off nicely with the deceased, and it's all of it is just so beautiful, including like when giving birth.
It's amazing. It's all, I mean, the thing is, like, I've, my wife has given birth 4 times. Like I've been there when each of my children has been born, and like the next day I've prepared bodies. Like I've like jumped between having a newborn and like worked with people on hospice, right? Like there's, like I've been able to go back and forth between those things, 4 times now. And it is amazing the commonalities, really, that like all these things are connected. Everyone who I've ever prepared was born, right? And everybody who's ever been born, like, is going to die. And and just knowing those things are connected, and knowing that one is going to lead to the other, and just learning to be okay with that. And like you say, like living, we're all living in that middle part. Like learning to be okay with that is everything.
And I think that's a good way to sign off the interview.
Beautiful.
Like, just to sum it all up in one. Thank you so much, Victor, for joining me.
Robin, thank you. No, this has been such a pleasure. It's not every day I get to talk to someone in Africa, so it's a blessing.
And Victor's not on many social media platforms, but he has an Instagram page, and I will link it in the
Yeah,
description below.
you were one of like my first 10 followers, so kudos to you.
I think I saw it in the Wired caption thing. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, he's got a social media. I'm gonna follow.
Sounds
Okay,
good. Let's
Victor.
do it. All right.
Thank you so much, and
Of course,
good luck
you're
with the
welcome.
rest of your career endeavor. And
Thank you.
yeah.